Live Fit Podcast, episode 85, The Real Story of a Disordered Eater.
When I was younger, I developed pretty early, and so by fourth grade, I looked more shapely, more curvy than all the girls in my class, and I would get really negative attention for that. But it's more of the fact that I didn't really have any adult models in my life to help me go through it, and so what I ended up doing was internalizing all of these feelings. You're adhering to this societal girls shouldn't, and not even knowing what that meant. I would try to eat 100 calories a day. Well, I think as far as my advice to young girls is that there is a better way and there's a better side. And for me, I went through this, but I'm in a place now where I'm I couldn't imagine if my own daughter was going through this. And it's so much more fulfilling to be healthy in a healthy way and to, exercise and eat right, and just supplement your life with being well, because that really, it makes your soul so much stronger. But if you are going through it, if you can realize how special life is and how special each day is, then you become a much happier, much more stable person, and you feel much more free. And I think, for people that are going through this right now, that's the best thing I can say is that it's hard, but each and every day is a gift, and it should be treated like that.
Welcome to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson, your resource for all things that contribute to good health. You will hear expert advice and interviews with leading authorities on fitness, food, fat loss, mindset, and the mind-body connection. You will find show notes, articles, and health programs at livefitpodcast.com.
Yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Johnson. This is episode 85, and today we're going to hear the real story of a disordered eater. Today I'm speaking with a young woman who's recovering from 12 years of eating disorders. She started becoming aware that her body was not perfect when she was about 10 years old, and she took steps to look like everybody else. These steps were not healthy to her body or her mind. She tried to survive off of 100 calories a day. But then she discovered purging, and that opened up a whole new world. We're going to hear the real story of a child who developed eating disorders, poor body image, and how she overcame them both to be healthy in body and mind today as a young adult. I'd also like to ask that you share this podcast with everybody you know and care about, especially if they have a young child, male or female. Now, this particular subject is important to me because I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I certainly don't want her to go down the same path that Savannah from this interview does. But sometimes it's a little bit tricky. It's a delicate subject because she learned about purging in a health class. So education might seem like a good idea, but it also might put ideas in somebody's head. So I think the best approach, as Savannah points out later in this interview, is to really be aware of your child, be involved in their life, be involved in their thoughts and their opinions and their feelings. So share this interview, share this podcast, leave reviews. This will help share it with other people who might benefit from it. One more thing. The interview was recorded over the phone, and the reception wasn't great. It was hard to tell until I listened to it back, and I did everything I could to clean it up, but there's only so much you can do. So let's get on with Savannah and hear her trials and tribulations as she developed and overcame her eating disorders. Hi, Savannah. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good.
So, Savannah, the reason I wanted to speak with you today is because you told me a story about your younger years leading up to present day, and how you had a bit of a struggle with eating and body image and your weight. And I really wanted to share that with my audience because I think it's really important for people to understand how these things get started and the effects that it can have on a person, the long-term effects it can have on a person, and what can be done about it. Can you maybe back up and tell tell us your story, what happened and how you became a disordered eater?
Well, it's kind of hard to pinpoint like an exact time or day because, it's been, like 11 and a half years, I think, that I've kind of been struggling with this.
And it certainly was a gradual process, not one day somebody said something,
yeah,
or a switch flipped, but a gradual thing. So what, in hindsight, what do you think really led to your ideas of eating and body image changing from healthy to not so?
When I was younger, I developed pretty early, and so by like fourth grade, I looked more shapely, more curvy than all the girls in my class, and I would get really negative attention for that. And I think that sort of like got the gears going in my mind, like that insecure kind of like, okay, I don't look like everyone else, like I am not comfortable feeling this way, like I have to go buy bras and none of my friends do, and kind of stuff like that. And it was, at such a young age, at such an impressionable time, it was really kind of difficult for me to feel comfortable in my own skin. And that manifested itself throughout time in that gradual, way. And I wasn't necessarily thinking about eating disorders or stuff like that at that young of an age. It took about a year and a half for me to kind of like evolve to that point.
Sure.
But it definitely started when I was younger, and I didn't really feel like I had a lot of support at home because as a young girl, you're very shy and like you don't want to talk about that kind of stuff because it's so uncomfortable. And like my mom was going to college, and which was great for her, but I was living with my dad and my stepmom, and they weren't like the most like involved people in my life, so I didn't really feel like I had a good outlet. I didn't feel like I had really a way to kind of get any comfort for that. I wasn't ever told that it was okay that I looked different, or that I was, a little bit more developed than other girls, or that, all that stuff kind of just like, I just internalized it and tried to move on, and, obviously I didn't move on. I did the exact opposite. But I think that's sort of when it really started to kind of come about, was at that time.
Yeah, and when I think back to when I was a kid, and it was a very, very, very common, and it was the culture to make fun of people that were different.
Yeah.
Oh, they got a haircut, they look a little bit funny, so make up some cute little phrase and call them that name. And
yeah,
I had red hair when I was a kid, and I was called Carrot Top, and I would go home crying. It was so upsetting. And it wasn't the word Carrot Top. What does that actually mean? For one, Carrot Tops are green, or you could say that my head looked like a carrot because it was, red-ish, ginger colored. What's the big deal? So what? But it was more of the malice intent. And I think kids don't really understand the harm they're doing, and even they might get it and then they give it too because they want to get rid of it, or they might receive this, but of course they don't like it, so then they want to pay people back for it. And so, I understand it on that sort of level, but what's happening is that they're just they're awkward at communicating. So maybe you like someone, and instead of just coming up and being their friend and saying, "Hey, how are you? You want to play?" you make fun of them. Sometimes you don't like them and you're teasing them to make them feel bad intentionally. I'm sure that's in there as well. But kids are cruel, and unfortunately, it has some really lasting effects in a person's psyche.
Yeah, and I think I don't necessarily blame any of those kids. Kids are kids, and honestly, I definitely had my share of making fun of people because of my own insecurities. And I think that obviously made me feel better, which is, now knowing what I know now is just, horrible. But as a kid, you don't know. You don't understand that. Yeah. And so I don't necessarily, feel like, oh, you guys ruined me. But it's more of the fact that I didn't really have any adult models in my life to help me go through it. And so what I ended up doing was just internalizing all of these feelings. And so I wasn't able to kind of like get that out there. And, I think all kids go through something like that. Everyone goes through that at some point in their life where they don't feel like they fit in.
Right.
Or, stuff like that. And I don't necessarily think that it always has to end up in depression, anxiety, eating disorders, all those things that go along kind of with that. I think that a lot of people are like, they grow out of that. That's the hope for most people. But I think when you come from a place where you don't feel supported by the people that should be supporting you is when you feel that you need to take on the responsibility to yourself, and being that young and taking on that responsibility is very hard.
Oh, most certainly. And, back to the story when I was called Carrot Top, I would go home crying, and then my mom told me, so what? Just tell the kids, so what? Doesn't bother you. Why are you calling me that? What's the big deal? And I said, what? That's it? I just tell them it doesn't bother me and they're going to stop? And she said, yeah. And so I tried it the very next day, and guess what? They stopped. In fact, the kid who was calling me Carrot Top, we later became best friends, but he started crying because it didn't bother me. He said, what? It doesn't bother you? I'm like, no. He's like, ah. It's funny. I mean, talk about deflecting. But you have to have that knowledge, because I never would have come up with that solution on my own. Never. No way. But my mom told me this, and it actually worked. And had you had somebody to give you a similar advice?
Yes, well, that for sure. And I think looking now, like society, the whole like cliche society has like this ideal image for women. And unfortunately for me at the time, my stepmom kind of fit that image. So for her, like, she didn't really see outside of that. And so it was weird for her that I looked different too. So like, not only was I getting it from my peers, but also from someone who was supposed to be taking care of me at the time, which was probably ultimately kind of what pushed me even farther.
Well, that unfortunately is a very common story where the mother is trying to help the child, the daughter, not be made fun of. So they encourage them to go on diets and other things and pay attention to their appearance. Also, maybe the mother is trying to live vicariously through the daughter so the daughter can have a better life than she did. And, in either scenario and others I didn't mention, it's still very harmful.
Yeah, and my mom, who I'm close with, she was going to school, like I mentioned earlier. And so she wasn't really kind of around, and I wonder sometimes like if it would have been different if I would have had her, because she went through a lot of the same stuff that I did. And she actually has her own story with eating disorders and body image issues and stuff. And so she understands that, and we've talked about it before, but in those years she wasn't there, and I was too uncomfortable to try to talk about it. So I don't know.
How young were you? What was your age around this time?
I was going into 5th grade, so I don't know how old you are in 5th grade. Like 10 or 11,
right, yeah, 10,
maybe?
10, 11-ish, right in there. One of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty young to have. That's a higher developed sense of cognition to kind of think outside your own world, your own life, and maybe ask for help or recognize that other people might be going through it. And that's something that we generally experience and develop as we age and mature. So, no fault of yours, and you're not the only one that's had that kind of situation. But I'm sure you didn't know that at the time either.
No, I didn't really at the time know what was going on. I think I had, my own insecurities, but cognitively I wasn't aware of the consequences or also the solutions. And so, what made me feel better was trying to either lose weight or change my appearance in any way possible, or make fun of other people to make myself feel better, or be friends with like the cool kid, like that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of things that like the immature things that you fake as a kid, because you don't understand, that you can't see outside of yourself in that moment.
Right. And anybody who's different is an outcast in a sense.
Yeah.
So tell me, what were you doing? I understand how you felt, and kids were teasing you, and you weren't getting support at home. But what were you doing in this? Were you not eating? Were you eating certain foods? Were you dieting? Were you exercising? What physical actions was happening during this time?
Yeah, so at that time I hadn't really learned about like eating disorders fully, like purging, which is what I ended up doing for a long time. But at that point I was starting to develop a list, and what they like, this is really, really common for people with eating disorders or body image issues, is that you make these mental lists of things that are okay and things that aren't okay. So for me, like pizza, not okay, you know,
right.
And so things like that, ice cream, not okay, stuff like that. So yeah, I was definitely changing my diet, but not in a healthy way, because I didn't know about macros, I didn't know about protein, I didn't know about portions, you know, stuff like that. So basically, like, I would just eat like vegetables all day, or I'd go to school, and if they had lunch, I would get, I don't know, a water, and like they had these wheat donuts, this is so funny, but they had these like, they were whole wheat donuts, and they had like this icing on them. And to me, in my little immature brain, I was like, oh, they're whole wheat, it's okay. So I would eat those all the time, but then I wouldn't eat anything else. And then my dad and my stepmom like always wanted my sister and I to have dinner with like as a family. But I would scream and cry and fight, and I wouldn't ever want to eat at night, because I felt like eating at night was bad, because then you're sleeping and you're dormant, and you're, you know, and knowing now what I know, that's not true. But
right.
You know, as a young kid, you develop these like habits, or like you just believe everything you say to yourself. So you're like, oh, pizza, not okay. Okay, I'm never eating pizza again. So like, if I go to a friend's house, they have pizza, I wouldn't eat it. And then you start getting kind of positive attention for that, because you're different for a different reason. You know what I mean? Like, you're adhering to this like societal, like, girls shouldn't eat kind of thing. Right. And like, so then I started getting, like, my friends would be like, oh, well, it's like this kind of positive negative attention, if that makes sense. You know, you get kind of like made fun of for not eating, but that feels good, because you're like, well, I'm better than you, kind of, because like I can say no to pizza and you can't.
Right.
And so that sort of started first, like that kind of like list development, changing what I was eating, being really immature about it, and thinking that and I started counting calories at like 11 years old.
Wow.
And not even knowing what that meant. I would try to eat 100 calories a day.
What?
So I was living off of like yogurt, like these little 100-calorie yogurt things.
That's all you were eating all day?
Yeah, and so, well, that's what I was trying to eat all day. Sometimes my stepmom or my dad would like try to like force me to eat, but I would fight them every single day. It was a battle.
Wow.
And so that was, and then I was playing sports too. I was always active as a kid. Like, I did all the sports. I was in dance. I did musical theater. Like, I was always doing stuff. So I would exercise on top of that by like running with my dog. And so we'd like run around the block, or like I'd ride my bike or something. But I didn't know about like, you know, lifting and like those kind of exercises. I was like, I didn't even think I know what cardio was at the time. I just knew that if you did stuff, you burned calories, and if you ate less calories, you would lose weight. That was the mental capacity that I had for what I was doing. And then that kind of led me into, I never was diagnosed with anorexia, because I don't think that my dad or my stepmom ever really like noticed that much. So I never like went to the doctor for that. But when I went into middle school, and I was taking a health class, actually, I was in 6th grade, and my teacher, we were doing a section on eating disorders, and my teacher was telling us about eating disorders and anorexia and bulimia and like body dysmorphic disorder and stuff like that. And so that was like, I was like, what? You can eat and then throw it up and you can be fine? Like, that to me was like gold. That was like the best news I'd ever heard in my life,
All
which
this
is
time
really
I've
sad.
been starving myself, and I could have
Yeah.
been eating and barfing. Wow, so much
Yeah.
better.
So I'm like, cool, I can have pizza and then not have to worry about, like, being fat. And so I was, like, so stoked about this. So that day I went to the library at my school, and I was looking for books about eating disorders so I could learn how to do it. And so I actually got a book, and I can't remember now what it's called, but it was a fiction book about a girl that was going through a lot of stuff at home, and she had a friend, and her friend had an eating disorder, and she kind of, like, taught her how to do it, basically.
Right.
And so I read this book, like, a few times, and it was mainly because I think now looking back, I related to this girl because she was just dealing with a lot of stuff, and I was dealing with a lot of stuff at a young age. And so I remember there was this one section of the book, and it was her friend, this girl, was, like, telling her, like, okay, this is the kind of stuff you should eat, like soft food and drink soda, because this, like, the carbonation helps your body reject food, which actually, looking back now, I don't even know if that's true because I haven't even thought about that since that time. But I remember at the time thinking, like, oh, that makes sense. Like, yeah. So I would drink Diet Coke and eat, like, soft food. And then, like, I would avoid bread because it was too hard to, like, get back out.
Huh.
So I would do that, and then I started using, like, a toothbrush end. Like, I got a toothbrush from the dollar store.
Yeah.
And so I started using that, and then that was, like, hurting my throat. So then just from there, like, I mean, you know, you become good at stuff and you do it for a long time. So that's, like, how that all started.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. If it, you know, because I've been sick before and vomited, and it's really not a pleasant experience, and it's hard to imagine doing that on purpose. But I guess you get kind of used to it, and it's just a matter of what you do, right?
That, and it's not even a matter of getting used to it. It's a matter of when after and actually during, like, you feel good. Like, it starts to feel good, honestly. And I know that's probably really hard for anyone who hasn't gone through this to understand, because being sick is horrible. Like, you know, everyone hates that.
But there's a certain satisfaction to it, I guess. It's more of a mental feel good than a physical.
And it's a release. And, like, I get that when people, like, as I never really, like, cut myself, like, but I get why people do, because I felt the same exact feeling. And then, you know, you feel this, like, it's like a rush. It's like a physical feeling from, like, head to toe of just, like, this, like, feeling of release, like, kind of like when you jump into, like, cold water.
Right.
Or, like, something like that, you know. I don't really know how to describe it, because it's just kind of like, I mean, honestly, like, I've never done, like, really, like, any, like, hard drugs or anything, but kind of I feel like, well, that's what that would feel like.
Interesting. And was that something that developed over time?
Yeah, because obviously the first few times were really hard, and I couldn't do it, and I would get really frustrated. So then when I kind of figured out what worked for me, I was, like, happy about it. So I associated doing this thing with feelings of being happy, and, like, it was, like, a good feeling. So I definitely took a little bit of time for me to, like, be okay with it, but then, you know, it doesn't take long. After a few months, I was fine with it. I was happy. I wanted to do it. I was, like, doing it a lot. And so, it took a little bit of time, but it does feel good at some point.
You know what really scares me about this? Well, there's two things. One is I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I of course, am aware of the path that some girls go down, such that you did. So I'm kind of being aware, and also giving her lots of healthy nutrition knowledge, advice, and we do talk about it. And she looks at food labels and looks at the sugar and fat and calorie content and all that, but she's not adding it up. She's not trying to limit them at all. It's more of a informational, so she knows what she's putting into her body. She reads ingredients. She's into cooking as well, so she's really interested in that. But the main thing that really scares me is you learned of this in a health class
at school,
and
yep.
that sort of, instead of steering you away from it, it steered you towards it, and that was a bit of a hesitation with even doing this interview with you, because I do want to make people aware of what a slippery slope it is, and just the little things that you might say to somebody, or how you're receiving something that somebody said to you, how it can affect your life. So I think it's important that we know, but I also don't want to steer anybody in the direction that you did, certainly unintentionally. Do you have any kind of advice that could help people separate let's say, the good from the bad?
Well, I definitely do. I think as far as parenting goes, I'm not a parent. I can't imagine how hard it could be. So I'm not coming from a place of like, be better parents, but as being like from a place of being a child who I felt like I didn't have that support. I feel like at the time for me, it wasn't necessarily learning it at school. It was the fact that I was already in a bad place and I was looking for something. I was looking for anything. And so that kind of was the thing I was looking for. And so I think as a parent, if you're involved in, I'll include boys too, but I'm going to say specifically girls because it is a bigger problem for girls. And,
right.
And I know that girls can take these things kind of way farther.
Right.
So I think being involved in your daughter's life and talking to them about the things that they've learned and, doing what you're doing, because I think that's so important. Like if I had a child, they would know about nutrition. They would know about food labels. They would know, because it's important. Because for me, like if I would have had that knowledge, like I might have turned out totally different. I might have realized that what I was doing was very unhealthy. And I could have gone a different way with nutrition and, instead of limiting myself, but just changing. And maybe not even necessarily changing, because I don't feel like any 11-year-old girl should have to, not eat pizza.
Right.
But to be aware, I think, is the power that lies in this. And I think being aware as parents is also extremely important, because, if you don't know and then, a couple of years go by and your daughter's already been kind of dealing with this, honestly, it's like, I hate to say it, but it's like too late. Like, you have to be there from the beginning, because I think for girls, it is so easy to get caught up in this and then see all these good things. It's like, what am I trying to say? Like, it's just like this beautiful, like, masked evil, like, and it's so horrible, but to the person, it's like rose-tinted glasses, And so I feel like if there's someone there to be like, that's not how you should live your life. That's not healthy. You're beautiful. This is what you should, like, this is portion control, macros, your carbs, proteins, all those things. Like, if you give someone the knowledge, like, the power of being aware, I think that is so important. And I think that will deter so many young girls from going on this path.
Well, good. Maybe people listening to this. I was going to say, maybe people listening to this will share this with their young girls. I'm going to have my daughter listen to it as well.
Yeah. Well, I think as far as like my advice to young girls is that there is a better way and there's a better side. And for me, I went through this, but I'm in a place now where I couldn't imagine if my own daughter was going through this. And it's so much more fulfilling to be healthy in a healthy way and to, exercise and eat right and just supplement your life with being well. Because that really, like, it makes your soul so much stronger. And when you're going through eating disorders and you feel weak and you feel disgusting and you feel shameful, like, those are things that go with that. And if you can avoid that, then that's honestly, you'll be so much happier. And it's taken me a really long time to get to that place. And if I could encourage anyone to just skip all of that and find this like inner peace through just being a healthy, well person, then that would be, that's the best thing possible.
Yeah. What's really difficult is this appearance-based society we live in. We see it everywhere we turn, even the evening news and the morning news and the magazines and, of course, all these reality shows on Facebook. They're always showing pictures of people's abs and, skinny people and, of course, models, which you see them in person, they don't really look very attractive, but they photograph well, and that's why they're models. It's not because they represent real people. It's just because they make the clothes look good.
Yeah, and I think being, again, from a parent, or not from a parent, but to parents, I think if you can acknowledge that and just show your kids in general, daughters specifically, that that's not real, and it's okay to be different, and it's okay to be, it's okay to be super skinny. I know some girls that hate that, and they're just naturally really thin, and they don't want to be, but it's okay because that's your body, and your body is going to naturally be the way that it was meant to be. And I know it's hard to be accepting of that, and also I know that it's hard when your child is in pain. It's hard as a parent to not know what to do.
Right.
And I think the best thing to do is just reassurance, encouragement, positivity. If that is what you're surrounding your child, there's no way that they'll turn out with this situation. But I think it's important to be positive with your kids and just let them know that no matter what, it's okay, and that you don't feel like they're any different or they need to diet or exercise more. And like that was a problem for me too. Like my stepmom would tell me, oh, you look fat in that, or like you need to walk home because you need to burn calories. Like those are the kinds of things that I was dealing with. And so I think that if you can eliminate that, that's a huge step in the right direction.
Right. And one of the things I deal with as a health coach and personal trainer is people, most people, at least under the age of 50, don't really care about health. Most of them don't want to do any of this stuff for health reasons. It's all appearance.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And it's terribly troubling to me because I who doesn't like something that looks good? You want to look in the mirror and like what you see. You want to look around and see pretty people all the time, but that's not reality. And not everybody can be pretty, because if they were, then nobody would.
Yeah.
But we should really focus on the long term, and it's hard to convince a 20-year-old that what they do with their body, how they live, and the habits that they develop now will make an impact on them when they're 50 and 60, and if they live longer than that.
Yeah, definitely.
The foresight is really limited on younger people. But I would like to applaud you for the progress you've made so far. You're, 20, 21,
22,
something like that?
Yeah.
You're 22, and do you feel like you have this thing licked, that you're all better? I mean, certainly it's something that's in the back of your mind, but
yeah.
Do you still struggle?
Well, that's yes and no. I feel like I have come really far in the last year and a half. It'll be 1 year in June since the last time that I purged. So that's kind of a big feat for me.
Right.
Just in that sense. But also in the last year and a half, let me back up a little bit. When I was 18, I moved to Portland the day after I graduated high school. Basically with like nothing. I packed my car and had $400, and I came up here because I needed to find myself through my own way. I was like, this stuff is coming at home. I can't deal with it. I just know that I'll never be truly peaceful if I don't kind of find my own way. So I moved up here, and I did struggle a lot when I moved up here because I struggled. I struggled with money. I struggled in school. I struggled, with the body image. I struggled with finding friends. You struggle with that kind of stuff on a daily basis, not just life stuff, but that amplified my eating disorders. And so I definitely, when I got here, it got worse for a little while. But then, I figured out what I wanted to do in school, I found outlets for myself. I made friends. I met my boyfriend, who I've been with for 2 years. I have lived in my apartment for a few years. Like, I found stability here, and that was a huge, huge step for me because I had never had that. And so I've never lived in the same place for over a year since I moved here. And so to be able to, like, stabilize my own life has, like, led me into the right direction. And then after that, I, was like, okay, I really, I've kind of figured out some things, and now I'm ready to face this because I had never really been ready to face it head on. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And I actually was seeing a counselor at PCC for a while, and she was really nice, but I didn't honestly, and I don't discourage anyone from seeing someone if that's what they need, but for me personally, it was more about the fact that I needed to change my mindset, and I started doing yoga, and I got a personal trainer, and I learned about real nutrition. I learned how to eat. I learned what works well for my body. I learned how to, supplement my life in a healthy way. And so I've been able to come a long way from that. But with all of that, I do struggle, not necessarily with wanting to purge because I feel like finally I've let that go. But, it's a daily reminder. I have to constantly be like, I'm okay. It's okay. Some days are better than others, and some days I feel horrible about myself. But when I start to feel that way, I have to say, you know what? You are who you are. You're doing everything you can to be healthy and not to be unnaturally thin and not to be sick and not to be, what people want me to be. Like, I finally feel like I was able to live my life for myself. And so through all of that, I definitely feel like I've got at least control of it. And that's the biggest thing. I think people start to feel out of control because they're like, this is controlling me, and now I'm controlling it. And it's still a part of me, and it always will be a part of me. It's who I am because I'm not actually, let me rephrase that. It's not who I am, but it is a part of who I am, and it is a part of who I am now. And so I think that, yes, I still struggle sometimes, but I definitely feel I'm in a very good place now.
You are awesome, Savannah. You are awesome. I love what you had to say, and I understand what you mean by it's a part of you, or at least it was a part of your makeup, your history, but it doesn't have to rule you or own you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what sort of self-care and health care and what sort of things do you do on a daily or at least regular basis that contributes to good health?
With like nutritional health.
Let me say health and wellness.
Yeah,
Let
okay.
me say health and wellness. That's more precise to what I mean.
Yeah, so every day is a new day, and every day, you have to remind yourself in the morning, like, you got to do the things you need to do to be well for that day. And that's what's really gotten me far, is taking everything one day at a time. And so as far as, like, nutrition, I have learned a lot. I see a nutritionist for this, and so she's helped me get through a lot trying to figure out, like, what foods I like and what foods are going to work well for my body. And I also don't diet because that it's not necessarily a trigger, but I don't feel like it's super necessary for me because I feel like I'm in a healthy place. And so I don't eat pizza every day, but if I want pizza, like, I'm going to eat it. It's in moderation. And that's what I feel like, I'm not going to limit myself because that can be, that can manifest into, a harsher cycle. And
exactly.
So I do, I take vitamins, I take probiotics because I actually had a really bad stomach infection. And my esophagus is really inflamed. And so I think it's like permanently damaged, which is unfortunate. And so, but so I take probiotics for my stomach, and I take, multivitamins, and I take iron because I'm iron deficient, and I take vitamin D. And so those things have helped me. I used to do actually vitamin B12 injections because I was so low in vitamin B12 that it was like at a very like astronomically low rate. Because I went and saw a holistic doctor And she actually recommended those to me because I was feeling very low energy, very lethargic, very, and I'm a very vivacious, like, vibrant person naturally. So
right.
to feel kind of not like myself a lot of the time was hard. And so just kind of taking the route of, and actually this kind of leads me into a whole other thing, but really quick, I want to touch on the fact that I think wellness comes from being natural, doing things in natural ways. Supplementing your body with vitamins and with food and with exercise is the best way to be healthy. And I don't believe in antibiotics. I don't believe in antidepressants, which I had to take when I was younger, and that actually also caused a lot of problems. And so I think if you can really just supplement your body naturally and, do things for yourself every day, because life is so hard and, we're constantly I have to do my homework. I have to go to work. I have to do all these errands. I just wrecked my car, which I did just wreck my car. So I'm dealing with that. And so I think there's a lot of things in life gets in the way. And I think if you put yourself first and you just say, I want to be healthy no matter what, I want to live well each day, and I think it's really beneficial. I have come so far in just my personality. I'm much more calm. I'm much less, volatile, because I had a really bad temper because, when you destroy your body, it affects your brain too. And so now I can see the difference in myself, that just each day I just grow more and more. And each day it makes me, and once you get started, it's you want to do that stuff because, if you're eating well and exercising, you see these changes and that makes you want to keep going. And so I think that's important. And for younger girls, because, I don't think it's necessarily super important that they get to the gym 5 times a week. They're little girls, and I think letting them be little girls is the most important thing. And just letting them
I agree.
make their own choices, but monitoring kind of what they're reading, what they're learning, what they're seeing, what they're internalizing. I think communication is a huge thing that I didn't have, that I hope that more parents can do for their. And I know it's hard. I'm sure it's hard to confront your 12-year-old daughter about an eating disorder, but it's something that you have to do, and it's a sacrifice you have to make in order to, stop, to put an end to it before it starts, because once it starts, it's kind of just a snowball effect.
I agree. Yeah, and that's why it's so important to think about it early, to be aware of actions and comments.
Yeah.
When a person is young. But yeah, I really like what you're saying about being all natural and not dieting, because deprivation is. Yeah, I do this experiment with my class and with my students when we get talking about food and dieting and things. I'll say, okay, I want you to take a deep breath and hold it. And then I talk about stuff. And then after about 30 seconds, I say, what's on your mind right now? And then another 15 seconds goes by and I say, okay, now what's the most important thing to you right now? And then many of them will say air.
Yeah.
That's all I care about. I don't care about donuts, and I don't care about watching TV. I care about breathing. And that's because you're depriving yourself. And if you really love chocolate and you say no more chocolate, that's what you're going to want more than anything else. Even if chocolate's not that big of a deal to you, as soon as you say or somebody says you can't have that anymore, boom, you want it more than anything.
Yep.
Well, I was gonna ask, back to the self-care thing. Do you do any sort of physical activity on a regular basis?
Yeah, I do. I actually work out quite a bit, but right now more than normal because I'm actually training for a Spartan race at the end of the summer, so trying to get in a better physical condition for that. But I try to live a very active life outside of the gym. We live in a beautiful place where we're lucky to have so many outlets. So I go hiking, I try to walk around as much as possible. I go for walks with my boyfriend, and we like to roller skate. So sometimes we'll roller skate through the park, and we go jogging, and we try to just keep things, each day do something. Right now, I have been working out 6 times a week, but that's because I'm actually doing something athletic, like I'm training for something, which is also like a huge deal for me because I've never done anything like that. And so I'm really excited to kind of see where that goes and see what I can do, you know, with my body in a positive, healthy way. But I also do yoga. I don't do that daily. I should, but I don't get to it every day. But I think that was also a really big part of the healing process that I went through because, you know, I was able to kind of center myself and focus and when you're sitting there and you're doing these poses that you kind of feel awkward about doing, you kind of have to face these things. You're left there to think about stuff, and you're left there to kind of be like, oh, you get more comfortable in your body because you're doing something that's kind of awkward. And so I think that was a big part for me, too, in moving forward. And then just, you know, being okay with not being good at working out. I know how funny that sounds, but the first few times that I went to the gym, I got a gym membership. The first few times I walk in there and I'm like intimidated. I'm like, I don't know what I am doing here. Like, I have no idea what any of these machines do. I don't know what, you know, I had no idea. And so also getting some help really helped me. I did get a trainer, and that, you know, helped me kind of figure out what to do. And I think that can be really beneficial for people, is to get some outside help, whether that's counseling, whether that's personal training, whether that's with nutrition, because it's hard when you're, you know, you can go on Google and you read 100 different things and you're like, well, that wasn't helpful. And so I think getting someone who is able to help you specifically is a really important step, because then you have some guidance and it's a little bit easier to kind of understand each step.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you didn't stay away from the gym because you were a little bit intimidated. I remember my first times in a gym too, and I was certainly intimidated. I don't look like these guys.
Yeah.
I don't belong here. I've never been to a gym before. But, you know, your first time at anything is always a little bit intimidating. And I'm still a little bit nervous walking into situations, even if they're not new. The first day of school, I walk into class and go, I look at all these strange people looking at me.
Yeah.
So you just have to figure out a way to get past it. And I think I was really glad to hear that you said that you don't just exercise in a gym, but you go outside and do activities, and that you do yoga too, because that really shows that you have a balanced physicality about you. You're eating healthy foods primarily, correct?
Yeah.
But you will indulge now and then, correct? Yeah. And you're not beating yourself up about it. So that is fantastic for your wellness and for healthy eating. The exercise, the physical activity that you said you do sounds really great. You know, the first time not the first time, but several years ago, I met a woman who was, I don't know, 50, 52, somewhere in that area. And she told me that she is finally okay with herself. She's finally feeling balanced and comfortable with her body. She had body dysmorphism from the time she was in college. She was a swimsuit model, and of course you have to look a certain way, and that's how she helped pay for college. But it also was very damaging to her, and so she started at age 18 or so, maybe a little bit younger, all the way through her late 40s before she really got a healthy sense of self and was living a healthy lifestyle with balanced nutrition and physical activity. So I'm really thrilled, and that's why I wanted to speak with you today to share your story, because you had some trouble, but you got over it. And granted, it's going to be something that's going to linger for a while, and you'll have to kind of keep that monster at bay and keep it away from you, and realize that your long-term health is much more important than some momentary emotion or feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, hearing about that woman, I feel like, my mom still struggles. She dealt with that through all of her adult life. And so, into this day, she's 44. And, part of me, I just realized, this is going to be the best time of my life. Like, it may not be the best time of my life, but I'm young and I'm healthy and I'm active and I have a lot ahead of me, and I just want to appreciate it. And I don't want to have to constantly be like putting myself down, because it goes farther than just body image. Like, when you have these issues, it becomes, it steps up to other stuff. Like, you're not doing enough at school, you're not working hard enough, your house isn't clean enough. It's like, you strive for this perfectionism. And I find it like being able to let that go is like a very freeing feeling, because I don't, I'm doing the best I can, and that's okay. And I feel like if you can either just totally skip all of this, which is the best thing to do, but if you are going through it, if you can realize how special life is and how special each day is, then you become a much happier, much more stable person, and you feel much more free. And I think, for people that are going through this right now, that's the best thing I can say, is that it's hard, but each and every day is a gift, and it should be treated like that.
That is a fantastic parting shot right there. I think that's just a great note to end this conversation on. Every day is a gift and should be treated special.
Yeah.
I love it. I thank you, Savannah. I really appreciate your openness, your willingness to talk about this in public. And, as we've said, I really do anticipate that this will help somebody somewhere down the line, whether it's the person listening or somebody that they know. I do think that this knowledge can be very valuable and helpful to somebody, and maybe keep somebody on the healthy track to good longevity and a balanced sense of self and wellness.
Yeah, that's the hope for everyone.
Yes. So once again, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Wow, that was really moving and inspiring. And I'd really like to thank Savannah for her willingness to talk to all of us about it. I first heard her story a month or so ago, and I just knew I had to share it with all of you, because I have no idea how many other young people are going through the same thing she is, but I know there's quite a few, and nipping it in the bud is really the best solution for treatment, preventing it before it even starts. Because like she said, once that motor gets rolling, once that snowball gets rolling, gets that momentum up, it's really hard to stop. And it took her, 11, 12 years of struggle to get over it. And she wasn't even trying to at first. She thought that was just the way to be. So please, if you know anybody who's at an impressionable age, 9 and 10 is not too young to start becoming aware of how they're interpreting things and their thoughts and their feelings and what their outlets are. Most importantly, have an open communication with these people so you can understand what they're going through and offer some sage advice from the adult you are. All right, everybody. Thanks again for listening. You can find a complete transcript on the show notes page at livefitpodcast.com. And I will catch y'all in a week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Fit Podcast. Please subscribe and share with someone you care about. Read show notes, articles, resources, and learn more about our weight management programs at livefitpodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and always remember to live fit.